Welcome everyone to episode 6 of How to Do Psychedelics. I'm here with my guest today, Kevin Orosz, and Kevin is a coach, entrepreneur, performance philosopher, and student of humanity's myths. He is driven by offering his voice and presence to improve the lives of people all over the world, and has led retreats and spoken at masterminds internationally, teaching the art of polarity. Through his book, Sex, Masculinity, and God, the Trialogues, online courses, evolutionary men's work, and private mentorship, Kevin teaches others how to create more impact and success, ignite polarity in relationships, and claim their kingdom. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Stoked to be here, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. I just want to say that I'm super excited to have Kevin here personally. You know, I crossed paths with him in the past through mutual friends, mostly knowing him in the online sphere. And, polarity is one of those things that I'm like, ooh, this is a tricky kind of sector to be in. And I always liked your takes. And I thought to myself, this guy's got something, And then we met in person at a coaching conference, had a connection. And then when I saw that he was offering space in a men's academy, at that point, I was like, man, I offer men's work, but I haven't been in a group that I could receive it from. And that's important to have that cycle, that feedback loop. And I'm like, let's go for it. And I tried on a lot of men's groups in the past, and jumping into the men's academy with Kevin and his partner, Christian, is just amazing. It's really helped me break through so many limiting beliefs around this like business and coaching and my story. And that's where I really got to get to know you better. And I'm super stoked and honored to consider you like a coach, a mentor, and a friend. And just happy to be here with you and share in this way.
Yeah, brother, the feeling is mutual. That's the beautiful like serendipity of events and like meeting you there. I'd seen you in the online world too, because it like provided that like seed. And then later in the timeline, we get to like partner up and be in brotherhood together and work together. And it's really awesome, man. I'm super grateful that you reached out, and here we are.
Here we are. So Kevin and I have many common interests, though I find our intersection of curiosity and skill and in work amongst men's work, psychedelic work, and rites of passages, initiations, kind of hearkening to this idea of what's been missing in our culture, in our world, zooming out to this meta crisis of lack of meaning. And I kind of want to couch that as a starting point. And I just want to ask you, considering this particular combination of ideas of the men's work, rites of passage, what's happening in the world right now around like meaning and purpose. What do you think? What do you think is the most important thing for men to be looking at right now?
Yeah, I mean the kind of meta crisis, which is involving the entire world, right? It's like social, political, economic, cultural. There's a military like war crisis, that's like the meta crisis. But then the meaning crisis is specifically the crisis of like human beings, psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually. Where men come into this picture is throughout history, thousands, tens of thousands of years, men have been embedded in a masculine culture of the rite of passage, of initiation, and of brotherhood, right? Male, like multi-generational mentorship, basically. Now, Western culture has done a lot of things really well, specifically, STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and like making all this cool tech and these toys and improving the quality of life, increasing the lifespan, building up this very powerful technocratic civilization. But what it has done a very poor job of is couching men in the context and meaning of what it means to be a man, which is, in my estimation, in the simplest way possible. It's like men are builders, creatives, or leaders, protectors, providers. And our relationship to the creator, whatever you believe that is, or the infinite, has to be placed in the context of the village and our community. And so a lot of men are drifting without meaning right now because what the culture offers as meaning is climb the social hierarchy, attain status, get a good job and climb that hierarchy, get money, chase the most beautiful woman and get sex, right? It's just very much base, primal, egoic, and like, let us say, lower consciousness center urges, which is nothing inherently wrong with any of those. They're completely natural in human life. But what's been lost is the guiding purpose and vision of men in context. And that comes from initiation, right? Boys are, um, you know, in need of this rite of passage or ritual of initiation, which male elders have always provided in all cultures. And we've kind of lost that. You know, we have the military, we have fraternities, we have business, but these are all pseudo initiations. Being parts of men's work, you know, I've worked with Sacred Sons, I've worked with the European men's movement, I've worked with former Mankind Project practitioners, I've been a part of Elliot Holst as a mentor in his trainings. These retreats, programs, initiatives, you know, groups, brotherhoods, all are helping men psychologically transition and mature out of the world of the mother, which is like me, what can I get, into the world of the father, which is what can I give. So actually about self-sacrifice and nobility and a givingness. And a lot of men don't realize that that's actually the antidote to depression, anxiety, and meaninglessness. It's not chasing those flashy things. And that's kind of that's where the culture is really failing us, because there's very few people in the mainstream that are even talking about this. They're dunking on men and saying all men are terrible. They should pay reparations to women. Let's cancel them. Let's tell them what they're doing wrong. And this is not what young men need right now.
And so considering all that, all this work that men can be doing, learning to come into giving and come into healthy relationship with mentorship and rites of passage, what role do you believe in the current world right now does psychedelics play into that, if at all?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very biased because plant medicine played a huge role in my journey, and it still does. I don't recommend it, and none of this is medical advice, right? I mean, obviously, you need to do your own research and understand it, which I know you can speak heavily to. But you know, I'm of the mind. I love history and mythology, and I also love the history of culture and civilization. And, you know, the classic example is the rites at Eleusis in Athens, and we can go back into hunter-gatherer society.
Right.
All these cultures had a relationship to plant medicine or psychedelics, and they had some kind of sacrament or ritual. We don't always know what it is. Was it ergotized beer or oats, like some kind of LSD compound? Was it psilocybin? Obviously, we have the rich psychedelia, you know, pharmacopoeia of the Americas. You know, we have peyote, wachuma, ayahuasca, all these things. I believe those things were guiding culture for those people, because in the ego dissolution and entering the other world and using that for healing, communion as a tribal rite together, it was community affirming, it was also life affirming, and it tuned us into the natural world. Now, Western civilization has broken off from that, and that's why we're seeing this kind of psychedelic renaissance right now. Now we have thousands of different psychedelic compounds, thanks to people like Sasha Shulgin and others. And people are finding immense benefit with these. There's also immense, you know, abuse and misuse of these powerful psychological tools. And I think that in the context of everything I shared before about men benefit greatly from the ego dissolution and, let us say, metaphysical, psychological, emotional transformation that's really capable in these ceremonies using these medicines. Now, that's always couched in how do we use them, right? And are we in right relationship with them? Because they're like, it's like nuclear energy for the self or the soul, I believe, for the psychological emotional system. And so I think there is a way that Western culture can greatly learn from psychedelics and come back into a sane, human, empathetic, attuned with nature and natural law way to guide forward, and also find a lot of meaning and reconnect to the divine aspect of humanity, the ephemeral sense that, like, yeah, we're here as a mystery. We know we're all going to die. And while we're alive, how can we live fully and die complete? And I think, you know, there's a lot of research now on how psychedelics really help this this endeavor. And so I think it's great that they're being propagated. Obviously, it needs to be done responsibly. And I think it's absurd that, I'm speaking to the legal side, it's absolutely absurd that any plant that grows from the earth should be illegal by the laws. Absolutely insane.
Yeah, totally agree on that. So from what I'm hearing, I imagine that you're a proponent of using psychedelics or plant medicines as an adjunct for such growth. So let's make it a little personal. Would you be willing to share a story of transformation where there was this combination of men's work and like psychedelics brought together in some kind of ritual, some kind of ceremony, and it was of value to you? It was something that felt pivotal or transformational or like really meaningful in a way that one without the other, it may not have been as such.
Yeah. I mean, the first one that came up, there's many. This was in Bali in Indonesia. I sat in a teepee with a Lakota elder with peyote, the cactus, and very masculine spirit, called the grandfather, very much solar energy, extremely heart opening, extremely powerful. And the ceremony is basically you sit in this teepee all night, from like basically sundown to sun up, praying, singing, chanting, and staring at the fire, sitting up all night and eating this plant. And I mean, for me, I had, at that point, I was pretty experienced. I'd had a lot of different ceremonies, but many of them were in my like party days, right? And then later I found, ayahuasca. I did things more ceremonially and discovered, the indigenous ways of serving these powerful plants. But that ceremony for me was like, it was about facing death. It was about reconciling my lineage, my father, my brother. It was very like masculine lineage, in the visions and the prayers I was, involved in that night. And what it did for me was, at that time in my life, I was in a big transition. So I had left a big relationship. I was trying to grow my business. This was actually right around when COVID hit. And I wasn't lost. I was definitely in an upgrade mode, but I was very like unintegrated and kind of like reaching at all these different things. And what that did for me is like, that cactus worked in my body and just, it rocked me, and psychologically, like physically I was fine. It was uncomfortable, but it showed me so many ways where I wasn't being a protector, a provider, where I wasn't in my like masculine power and aim. I wasn't like pointing my energy in one direction. I was scattered. And, over the course of that night, I just had, people talk about the ancestors and that energy, but, staring into the flame, it's not super hallucinogenic. For some people it is, but staring into the fire, I was seeing like faces, animals, and it was corresponding with an internal experience I was having of emotion and just insight and bombs going off of clarity, and also a lot of forgiveness and a lot of prayer around, where I'd fallen short, where I'd squandered my power. And, it's so beautiful as the sun comes up, we share a meal and we kind of like bless the water, drink the water together. You've been fasting all night, just eating this cactus. And then you come out of the teepee. We're in this beautiful rainforest in Indonesia on this like private property. And then we do this like flower ceremony, like celebration of life, where you're anointed with water and flowers, and just like the heart opening, just like tears that flowed that morning. I mean, I'm getting emotional even remembering it, like triggering the memory. Just like literally for a lot of men, they don't know why they're alive. That's kind of where I was like going in that night. It's like, why am I here? What am I supposed to do? And like singing, like someone was playing a piano. There's a piano at this property.
In the teepee?
No, we had left. We'd come out and we
Okay.
were doing the morning ceremony, and like just being grateful for life. And I spent that entire day. I ate like some fruit. I didn't eat a big meal. So I was like in that experience that entire day, the next day too, before I went to sleep. And I remember just walking around in the jungle and walking around looking at these flowers in this like koi pond of lily pads, and just being in awe, like literally being in reverence for existence at a level that I had never felt up to that point. And this is one night, one day, but then for months after that, I was in this prayer practice, meditation practice, and very much like all day awareness. And I credit that as like rocketing me forward in that season of my life where I had a massive business success. I entered a very beautiful relationship. Um, I started attending more men's circles, taking care of my body. Like, it was just a complete redirect in my life at that time. And that's just one of many. I've had that experience multiple times.
But that was the first of many of that type, that magnitude.
Well, I mean, before that, I had psilocybin and ayahuasca experiences. I'd put in that same tier where they were that like, whoa. But that was my second time with the cactus, and that has become like one of my favorite. I just absolutely love that medicine, especially for men. It's a very powerful masculine medicine.
And was that ceremony just with men in the teepee?
It was predominantly men. There were actually
Wow.
women there because some of the partners of the facilitators and people. But again, it felt very much like, for me personally, it was like a masculine kind of ceremony, like completely, because I was there alone. I wasn't there with a partner. I knew some of the people, but yeah.
You bring us some good points there. So the cacti and the wachuma, the peyote, you're right, these are solar medicines. They call upon this very masculine, ordering, penetrative energy and principle. And those particular kinds of ceremonies, they're a lot more strict and orderly. I'm assuming because it was a teepee ceremony, it was more of that nature. And they really help you focus. Like, people talk about intention quite a bit. And the way that these Native American ceremonies are structured and how they progress, it's like they have all of these checks and balances in place to be sure that you're with your intention and that you're with your attention the entire time. And that focus in the center with the fire, it's, as my teacher would say, impeccable mechanics of the altar to ensure that you're getting what you came for and that your attention stays focused on what you're doing. And I love how you mentioned that there was something that happened there that kind of like straightened out your sense of direction, like focusing and narrowing what you're doing. And doing that by ushering you into a place of peace and grace and absolute reverence for life. Wow, thank you for sharing that story. I have a lot of similar ones with cactus. I mean, when I discovered cactus, that's when I realized that the medicine work can be gentle. It can be full of love because they have this sun energy. For me, it was Wachuma when I first discovered cactus, and I was going through years of very masochistic shadow work with ayahuasca, and I thought master plant teachings had to be really painful. But I'm like, wow, I can be this embodied. I don't need to be ripped out of my body and having this largely confusing experience of consciousness and energy. I could be with this, and I can like be with people, be in a circle, be in a fire, be with my prayers, and still have an altered sort of experience of myself and of life. And that, I find, does allow for the meaning making and the integration to be a lot more tenable.
Yeah. I mean, this was a Lakota altar, and like, that's why I actually loved it so much. One of my mentors who we shared, Deanne, she always talked about the culture and the technology, the mechanics, like you said, around medicine are as powerful as the plant, because that's the context in which they've been used. And like, it's not like someone just came up with this. Like, all these elders talk about, like, spirit told them this, like, this is how you do it. It's not like, oh, let's do it this way. So for me, having sat with psilocybin in more informal settings, which are still insanely powerful, and sat with Shipibo ayahuasca, which also was structured, but it's much more flowy. It's very feminine, like you said. It's super like subconscious, unconscious, like astral. This was just in the body here at this fire all night, and you can't move. There's no chit chat. There's no leak of energy. It's rounds of song, prayer, silence, and structure. It's like this protocol. And that's actually why I loved it so much, because it was so contained. It was peak containment of like, there was no like way for, even the next day when we're all out of it and like people are starting to chit chat and like integrate together, I kind of just stayed in my own energy. I wasn't like sharing with a bunch of people. I mean, I talked a little bit. That's why I loved it so much. It was like what I needed. I needed that masculine, more stoic. And for some people it doesn't work. I know people after that TP that were like, God, my back hurts. Like, I never want to do this again. Like, it's not for everyone. It's much more of a stoic solar way. But
Hmm.
I also think for men, again, and talking about men's work, this is what so many men need, like exactly that kind of experience and setup.
Because of the structure and the discipline that
Yeah, it's
it
extremely
invites in.
masculine and it's so healthy for men. I mean, obviously, women have their masculine essence too. There was actually a woman in that teepee that was, she was, I think, a partner of one of the, I think the firekeeper, one of the sage man or something. And, she was in her full masculine, but as a woman, like she wasn't being a man, but you could
Hmm.
tell, she'd sat a lot with it. And like, it was beautiful to see women in that context, right? In this Native American church kind of tradition. Um, and that's the beauty of it. Like, it was also very communal. That's another good thing about those types of ceremonies that like the indigenous way hold. It's done as a community. It's not you alone in a room with the shaman and you go through this wild experience. Although there's a time and place for that too. We did it as a community. We share
Hmm.
meals, we share prayers, sing together, and integrate together. And like, I'd never felt, some of these people were strangers. I met them for the first time that night. Instant rapport and psychic empathy. And like, it was immense how the community aspect of it is so healing too.
Hmm. Yeah, and that goes back to what you said earlier. Village. The village is something we need more than anything right now. I mean, I would go so far as to say as the the detribalization of humankind is at cause for everything we're experiencing. And its absence is allowing for this great just like divide to continue to be like shoveled between us, now going down to aspects as fundamental as identity and gender. Like if we had these village dynamics, if we were close to people who know us, who we know, who help us understand who we are through constant communication and contact, rapport, and trust building, and that we share these wild experiences of life and consciousness with and without medicine, well then you can't help but be brought to a place where like I know who I am. I know what my purpose is. I have all these beautiful loving mirrors around me that help me see myself. We have a shared goal, which all stems from having that strong foundation of community and of the village.
Yeah, the village is at the heart of all the meaning crisis, as you already said. Like, there's a lot of evidence, and you can look at, there's still hunter gatherers alive today who never left the village. They're in the Amazon, they're in Africa, they're in, the bush in Australia. There's even some still in Europe and Asia. Um, the rates of mental disorder, the rates of cancer, heart disease, chronic illness, they're so low. And why is that? Is it their diet? Is it their workout routine? It's not. It's all like, I think all dis-ease is psychosomatic. Like, nothing happens by accident. Like, biology in this human body is the most powerful technology on the planet.
Hmm.
It's because you can't isolate, and your emotional regulation and any contraction is immediately met through the technology of the village, through ritual, ceremony, communal living. By alienating ourselves from that and isolating ourselves, chronic disease, mental illness, depression, anxiety, all these things just explode and balloon up. That's not by chance. Yeah, also our food and water, you could argue, are poison. You could argue the
Yeah.
pharmaceuticals are playing a role, but it's actually more the emotional and psychological regulation that happens when we live communally, which is how we evolved and I've always done it. This industrial revolution is very recent in the last century or two. Even 100 years ago in America, people were much more in a village. You had to be. It wasn't, texting and Uber Eats. You had to go get eggs from your neighbor. You went, church and religion in the West has kind of helped this function by creating a community of
Mm.
practice and of worship. I talk about this in the academy a lot, where we like ask ourselves, like, how do we build the best community? And like, what are the predictors? I forget the name of the study, but there's longitudinal studies. The two top predictors of whether a community is healthy and thriving and lasts long term is shared spiritual practice of any kind and shared musical practice, singing together, making music together. It's not all this other stuff like money, sex, power. Those are the things that usually destroy communities. That's what actually binds civilization together at the village level, at the Dunbar's number level. We're wired to relate to and remember emotionally about 150 to 250 people in this Dunbar's number, which has been proven through anthropological studies with primates and humans. And so the fact that we've lost that, it can't be understated. And we can just recreate it right now. Like, we don't have to do anything crazy. It's our natural state. So we just have to like unlearn the way we've learned to do things and as modern people.
I'm kind of laughing a bit because like I get the idea is fundamentally, like conceptually simple to recreate that. And I just imagine, okay, what if I just found like, or just gathered 150 of my favorite people and I had the means to bring them all together? Like, man, that would be a lot of work to create harmony for sure. I mean, even in this community, I'm here in the mountain, which has some aspects and nuggets of that. Like, I get all my food from the local farmers market once a week, and it's all from my friends and local farmers. And yeah, it's the ceremony and the song circles that keep us together. And dude, it's like personalities are all so big, you know, and it holds me to such a high degree of integrity because anytime I trespass someone or like I do something that's unkind or say something that's untrue, like there's no way shoveling that under the rug. Like it comes back around super fast. And, you know, it makes me think twice before like I get outside and go to some event. Like I gotta really be on my A game. And this is what I wanted. This has been carving me and shaping me and refining me like no other practice or ceremony. But it's a lot of work, man. We have so much work to do to be in the village. But it's a groundwork, you know?
Yeah, I mean the personality clashes and like who gets what, you know, the dynamics are immense, right? Like even 150 people, right? It's like, yeah, we have a country of 300 million people and there's all these micro decentralized communities and cities and towns and whatever. But yeah, the just 150 people with their personalities, their needs, their wants, their relationships. It's a mess, right? Humans are messy. Yeah, we're just emotional, not always rational. You know, we can be selfish, we can trespass and like fuck things up. And like that, I would argue, like, yeah, it's tough. Like I've lived in intentional communities. Um, I've been at retreats where they're demoing this for long periods of time. I've visited communities, you know, none of them are without their troubles and like dramas, right? That's just the human nature
Mhm.
of it. Now, what I will say though is like the alternative, it's not easy. It's simple, but it's not easy at all. It's very challenging. The alternative though is so detrimental because a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to deal with the drama. I just want me, my wife, my kids, my dog, and my job, right? It's just like, I'm just going to silo and do this thing. That's not working. Like you could say there's less drama. I have to deal with less interpersonal stuff because I'm not in this community. But like you still are in community. It's just been outsourced to the state, to like the corporate state. Like the corporations for most people, the vast majority of people, that's their village. Maybe they have a
Mhm.
softball team or they go to jujitsu or they have like a baking circle in their neighborhood.
Yeah, it explains
It's,
workaholism, right?
right. Like the state and the corporate feudalism that we live in, let's just call it what it is, that has replaced the village because that's now your village, right? But it's a very hierarchical and power over structure. It's not communal. It's not in this like shared spiritual practice or empathy or like actually coming to problems and disagreements, having elders mediate, being seen and sharing openly. It's very much like totalitarian in the softest sense. It's not like, you know, we're slave workers in like medieval England or something. We've definitely improved our freedom and our quality of life, but it's not psychologically and emotionally satisfying to modern human beings. And there's evidence of that with the mental health crisis, especially among men.
Mhm. So at this point, for the men listening, I'm sure some of them are curious and on board with this idea of like, okay, great. I understand psychedelics can be helpful. I've heard of men's work. I love this idea of the village. What sort of like initial steps could you offer to men out there who are hungry to move towards this and to be in these spaces? Because at least I know when I began, it was overwhelming. There were so many options and so many things going on, and it took me a while to orient towards a path that was just really nourishing and safe. And man, we don't want people who are want to get into this to make the same mistakes that we have. So like, what would you suggest to men out there who are ready for community and ready for transformation and healing in this way?
Yeah. I mean, this question is asked so often. I get guys like this messaging me online all the time. Where are the men? What do I do? How do I start? It's like, I don't want to coddle any men because I don't need that. You're not a victim. You have to take the initiative. So step one is join other men. Like it's literally that simple. It's not easy though, because you might be in a town or be somewhere where it's not available. But like perfect example, like you and I, we're living in different countries. We have this shared community in the men's academy, and there's thousands of such organizations. It can be even simpler of just going to your local martial arts gym. Go start jujitsu, go box,
Yeah.
go craft pottery, go, learn how to shoot. Just find the other men in your community, even two other men, like 3 men as a men's circle, right? 2 men as a dialogue, 3 men's a men's circle. You got to go to them. No one's going to come save you. Daddy and mommy aren't going to come force you to do the things. This is part of the maturation is like, you have to take initiative and go. And yeah, you could have wounds. You could have been hurt by men from school or sports experiences. A lot of men have like brotherhood wounds, myself included. Like it was humbling for me to go to other men and ask for support and advice, to be seen, to be vulnerable. That's why it's really powerful, I think, for a lot of guys out there who don't have context for a lot of this work we're talking about. You just need to do something together, right? Go fix a car together, go spar, go work out together, go hike. Just keep it super simple at first. And then when you're ready, doing your own research, resourcing yourself with other people in the community, getting advice, getting suggestions. Yeah, look into formal men's work. There's so many retreats, events, opportunities for that, for actual brotherhood and these technologies, facing the shadow, powering up, getting on purpose, falling in love, learning how to treat women with respect and how to date intelligently, which is a lot of the work I do. And then, yeah, at some point, doing your own research, maybe if you've never, dabbled in psychedelics or plant medicine, maybe ask around and find a facilitator who's very knowledgeable and trustable. And, if that's calling you, then seek it out. Like what you're seeking is seeking you. Like the nature of plant medicine is a synchronicity matrix. So you'll find those serendipitous moments to find your way into it. And obviously, like a lot of this has to be couched in, you have a piece of the puzzle. And this is what a lot of young men, it breaks my heart to see this. They think like no one cares. And that's why they're lone wolfing it. I'm just going to work my job. No one gives a shit. What am I going to do for society? They see all these guys and OnlyFans models on social media. They watch the news and it's like, it's hopeless. Fuck it. Like it's all fucked. And it's like, that's the power of brotherhood. You need a hall of mirrors of other men to help you. And this is, again, what the rite of passage and initiation did in our ancient tribes. It helps you understand your piece of the puzzle. What is your gift? Every man out there has a gift that they can give. It doesn't have to be grandiose. You could just be an amazing father. You could be a gardener. You could be a craftsman. It doesn't have to be something crazy. You don't need to become like an influencer or like a celebrity. But in context with men, you'll find out what your gift is because they can see it better than you can. You can't read the label from inside the bottle. So you need mirrors, you need community around you so you can discover your gift. And then you'll find by giving it, all your problems get solved. You immediately come into integrity and alignment with yourself, with your soul, and you just feel great and you feel like you're contributing. This is essential to men. Men are givers. You need to be giving. As T. Rob said, the secret to living is giving. And that's true, especially for men.
If you want to think about it archetypally, mythically, men, we inhabit the idea of order amongst all things, and it's like it's penetrative, it creates space, it's building, and so it's the outward force, and that's why we need a mission to guide us. We need something that orients us towards serving in order to be healthy. Couldn't agree more. Considering the state of affairs in the world, socially, politically, economically, and especially around what's happening between men and women as of late, and might even consider what's going on with gender too. I imagine it's really challenging in some ways, especially for men to be coming up and organizing with other men, finding other men. Just being a man sometimes just feels challenging. And so, with your understanding of what's happening in the space, with all these elements in mind, what would you say and what have you experienced as the biggest challenges men are having right now to like coming into their power?
Yeah, I mean, I see this all the time, and this is my past as well, and I'm still growing. I haven't figured everything out at all. But most men, this idea in the media, like Me Too, men are bad, they abuse women, they just want power and money, blah, 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 blah. It's not actually true. The vast majority, there are psychopaths out there. There are like evil men for sure. They're just a very small minority, and they tend to climb the ladder of hierarchy quite well because it's designed that way and incentivizes it, unfortunately. Most men are nice guys. So they're white knighting. They're trying to save women, save other men. They're trying to, be seen as good. They're virtue signaling in some way. Not in like the woke way, but in like, I want to be seen as a good guy. So I'm going to self-betray. I'm not going to set boundaries. I'm never going to say no. I'm going to fawn with women. I'll even maybe fawn with other men. And this is not serving. For most men, their biggest struggle is they're afraid of being disliked. They're afraid of hurting people, especially women in romantic situations. And they're probably also afraid of asking for what they want, which is why they're working a job that they hate. Most men I talk to when I coach them, it's very rare that, usually it's entrepreneurs or people in a job they love and are actually the best at. They all hate their job, or they at least are dissatisfied with it. They're kind of numbed out. And it's because they're not asking for what they want. Without the ability to set boundaries and say no to things and demand and claim their power, it starts with the voice and it goes to action and then behaviors and patterns. They'll just live a life where they feel like they're the victim of market forces and other men and whatever, McKenna famously said, like, you must have a plan, because if you don't have a plan, you will become part of someone else's plan. And a lot of these
That's
men
right.
become part of the plan of society or a corporation or their community or their church or political party, whatever. Like, they become a cog in the machine. And this is very dehumanizing for men. So most men I talk to, that's what they're struggling with. In a mainstream society that like paints men, there's all these like of ludicrous articles in like New York Times, Atlantic, these like leftist mainstream sources that get blasted at scale. The male loneliness crisis, why women don't want to have sex with men or be with men anymore. They prefer to be single. Why men are, abusers and they should be canceled and Me Too. Why men are joining the alt-right and politically like whatever. Like, so much is beating them down. And a lot of these men just need to stand up with a straight spine and say, no, like, I don't accept that. I'm going to set boundaries. I'm going to find the others, and I'm going to forge a path in my life that is filled with purpose and meaning for me, that's unique to me. And I'm going to do that in a good way that gives my gifts. And a lot of men are just scared, or they don't have the tools. They don't have the brotherhood. They're isolated. And so it comes full circle back to finding other men.
Is that a story that you personally relate to?
Oh yeah. I mean, growing up, I felt super alienated. I played football, I played soccer. I was an Eagle Scout. I wanted to go into academia. I studied psychology and philosophy, thought I was going to do my PhD and all this. And the whole time I just felt alienated. I never felt like, I mean, there were some men and professors and leaders that mentored me, and I was very grateful for some of them. But I felt super isolated and was a people pleaser and was trying to be a white knight, being seen as the nice, good guy. And women didn't respect that. Other men didn't respect that. And I didn't respect myself. That's why I took like a more radical path and like said, fuck academia. And then I quit my job, sold everything. And, I traveled the world and started writing. And then I, started teaching and learning Qigong and yoga. And then I got into personal training. And then I found coaching and men's work. I was cut from a cloth where I couldn't follow the cog in the machine path, but it came with a ton of pain and resistance, and everything I was describing, I experienced and still do experience sometimes today. It's an ongoing thing. It's not like you just solve it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This just has me like reflecting upon like my own journey. Yeah, I was definitely a bit of an outsider when I was young, but I had a group, and that was my place to be like the strange guy, the weirdo. And something happened, like, when I graduated college, I just started coming to grips with the fact that I wanted to be this nice guy. I wanted to like take care of people. But then one day I realized people around me that I loved were like giving me feedback that felt confusing. Like, hey, man, you're being kind of pushy. You're being kind of angry. Like, what's going on here? You're putting people down. You're being critical. And I'm like, oh, you're all just really sensitive. I'm just offering my feedback. And this is what got me into medicine work when it hit me so strong that this is after I like did my first ayahuasca journey and did like landmark and learned about stories, triggers, and our parts of ourselves that can hurt people that we're not aware of. I was just like, holy shit, I don't really know who I am. And I thought I was a good person. I thought I was a nice person. I thought I was taking care of people, but I'm hurting people and I don't know what to do now. And that just started to move forward. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to try this because I can't be this. But I don't know what I'm going to turn into. And it's been a long road since then. And even still, like, I know I've got skill to lead and to support men. And I still find myself like with so much grind and challenge towards men, especially other men who are doing things that I do in my community, who are like beautiful and skilled leaders. But it's those people that I want to be closest to that I feel most like repelled by at times. And I just sit there and I'm like, what's going on here? Like, I want to band together with these other strong men. But at other times I'm just like, I don't trust them, you know? And I even share this in my men's circle. I'm like, I do this. I gather you all. I do men's work. And that's the tip of my spear because it's what I've needed more than anything. Because I had an absent, remote, distant father. And I am admitting that because of that, I don't trust men. I trust women even more. And it's still happening every day. And, being honest about that is good medicine, but it's also sometimes it's just crippling to realize that I've been so distanced from my brothers.
Yeah, I can relate with so much of that. Like, this is the issue of a generation basically after World War II being raised by women. And it's not necessarily our father's fault because they didn't have the strong fatherhood either. And you can follow the lineage and the generational trauma back. A lot of men were raised by women. They had very strong, overbearing mothers, emotionally or physically absent fathers. And it set this up where, yeah, same with me. I had a lot of female friends back in the day and like could trust women more and was either afraid of men or trying to compete with them and blah, blah, blah. And that's why getting vulnerable with men and having male mentors and brotherhood is so essential because it recalibrates you to the masculine spirit of life, the father, the logos. And that's where we thrive. We're not meant to live as women do. We're different. Women have their own work and their own way. And if we want to be fathers, and most men do, we have to relearn that. And that's where the beauty of like, the buck stops here. We're like basically breaking generational curses as we move forward. And you see
Yeah.
this beautiful work happening. And a lot of men just need to like move through the rage first. And then underneath that is grief. And like, that's when we come into alignment and aliveness. And we do that with other men.
And I think that's why, in part, psychedelics have taken such an upswing in culture right now, because as our awareness has burgeoned around all the work that we get to do as men and as women to heal, man, once you start seeing what's there, it's like, that's a lot. And like you mentioned, many of us are first generation curse breakers taking up the mantle of doing this in like a very powerful way. And if I personally believe, if we're going to get to a place where we can contend with the ills and the pain of society at large, we need some extra juice. We need some support to move through this. Because if we went the slower, kind of like organic way of just effective coaching and psychosomatic modalities and guidance, sure, we can get somewhere. But there's a reason why psychedelics have become so big and so popular. And it's not just from the people who want to capitalize upon it. It's not just because they're, I think they're necessary. I think they play a super vital role and helping create the healing activities that we need to achieve homeostasis again, to rebuild the village so men can come into good union with other men, learn to trust them, and then with women and create like stable families again. It all feels like such essential basic work right now that these powerful tools need to help us with.
Yeah, I mean they're catalysts for consciousness. Some theories say that they're the reason we evolved language and higher learning, right? Like the whole like stone date hypothesis and like psilocybin being ubiquitous on the planet, it being NN-DMT, which perfectly fits into our serotonin receptors like a Lego. Um, and you could argue that for all these plants, ayahuasca, they all hit these pathways in our body that are perfectly mapped by the plant kingdom and those plant teachers. And this is also in the eagle condor prophecy, when the eagle and the condor fly together, there will be peace on earth for like thousands of years. The eagle consciousness of the West has sought more, build tech, build industry, military power, like yang. And then at this pinnacle in civilization, it's very interesting when it happened in the 1940s when R. Gordon Wasson and these characters, Huxley, are writing about their first experiences with mescaline, psilocybin, LSD, Albert Hoffman. At the time when the nukes hit, which is also the time, by the way, that UFO phenomenon exploded, there's all these interesting synchronicities with the last century that as the West reached this pinnacle of tech, we have the power of the sun. We can literally nuke and destroy the human race. At that same moment, in that same era, psychedelics returned to the West. You have the 1960s and this crazy movement. And Wasson, who's one of the people responsible for bringing psilocybin to the West, and Hoffman writes about it, Leary, Ram Dass, all those characters that were around then, they were journeying with the medicine and talking about this, that like, this has come back at this time to help guide us and ground us back into the Gaian consciousness. And then the condor, which has, been hidden in these jungles and deserts for thousands of years, and no one really knew about it unless you were an explorer. Now these medicines are becoming mainstream and entering our consciousness and our economies and our villages to bring us back. Like you said, we need support. And these consciousness expanding tools are an immense support to heal, to grow, and to gain clarity of vision. And this is why, I hope to see with RFK going in and the Trump administration and places in Europe have already decriminalized everything. Veterans with PTSD, people that are, have terminal illness and they want to get over end of life anxiety, all kinds of things that pharmaceuticals can't address because they're only going to the symptoms. Psychedelic medicine entering mainstream medicine is going to create a wave of healing for our broken members of culture and society. And then for the rest of us that are pretty well adapted but need some support, it's going to create a wave of consciousness expansion. And like the Aquarian age, right? It's an age, it's a golden age of returning consciousness to the forefront in the West, instead of this dystopian view where everything becomes totalitarian and warlike and machine-like, and this comes in with AI. It's like the AI, there's AI, which is artificial intelligence from the machine, from technology. And then there's there's natural intelligence, which exists in the plants, and they're exploding at the same time.
I never thought of it that way. There's so much intelligence burgeoning in the world right now. It feels like we're soaring towards some sort of event,
The eschaton or the omega point, right?
Either some extinction event or a salvation event is the way I see it. It's one or the other. And I don't know, I have a lot of hope. I truly do. But I'm also a pragmatist, and I know we're in a dark age. Pluto and Aquarius right now is what's coming through. Really happy to be an Aquarian in this world right now, honestly. Healthily detached. But it gives me a healthy vigor to do this work, because our choices matter now more than ever. And there's so much opportunity, there's so much possibility, there's so much clay to mold our lives in the future with. And it's in the face of great danger and great risk. and the potential for things to truly fall apart, because they already are. We can see that. And so, God, yeah, why not? Why not just do the work to come back together and, whoa, Kevin? Hmm. I'm going to wait a bit and see if he returns. I don't know if I pause this, if it will continue, or I could do a second recording. I could do a second recording. You can do more than one recording in a studio, in a project in the studio. Let me just now stop this right now. Or I could just wait a bit, because I can always cut this part out. Well, Kevin's power went out. It would seem to me that my premonition, or rather speaking the truth, the fact that we're heading towards some sort of salvation or extinction event, brought about the micro extinction of our communication. Too much truth for the airwaves, we could say. Anyway, we're going to call the show at that. Kevin and I had some great comments and shares, and yeah, we're just gonna end it on that strange note.